Welcome back to second part in the Lotus K swap. This is probably going to be the video where I get the motor in and possibly attempt a first start. Hopefully, like I said, this series is pretty quick. I now have like 99% of everything I need. I'm just waiting on an intake manifold, but I still have other things to do to the engine anyway, which I've started on, as you can see. So I began with essentially just scrapping down it because I haven't really taken the motor technically apart. I took off the old intake manifold, the power steering pump, the cut up wiring harness, any coolant lines that I won't be using, the thermostat, and then basically I just removed the valve cover, the front timing cover, and the OEM oil pan. And I already removed the OEM oil pump as well, which is actually over here. As you can see, that's the pan. The oil pump is massive. I mean massive, it literally is like a supercharger. It's pretty heavy as well. I'll show you the new K20 pump. That is this unit right here. It's very small, very light. It's already modified. As you can see, it's cut right there at the bottom. Normally you just have to do that, but I mean, like I said, it wasn't anything extra, so might as well save time. Now, it's a full kit. It was like $400. It was $400, I believe. Yeah, came with all OEM bolts for basically the full pump replacement, the windage tray, the pump, and yeah, and it comes with like the new chain for the pump and the new little guide, which right here you'll see. I just removed that actually. The guide sat right here, and the chain kind of goes down here and hooks around, and the pump literally sits in the oil pan. This is one of the only designs I've seen like this. Like Toyota, for example, most engines, the pump is part of like the crankshaft, or it's in between the crankshaft and the crank timing gear usually. Like on an RB, that's where it is. On the 2ZZ Toyota motor, that's where it is. With the K series, it literally sits in the pan, and it is literally the pickup, which honestly makes the most sense engineering wise, but I'm sure there's a more technical reason. I already put in the 50-degree RPC VTC gear, which is what basically advances timing, and the stock gear that comes with this, it's RBB. RBC is the K20 from the 8th gen SI, which is also what I'm using the intake manifold out of, which isn't here. But basically, this allows up to 50 degrees of advance. The stock one only allows about 20 or 25 degrees, and I believe it advances 5 degrees at a time. And essentially what it is it's a very quick explanation, but basically in there, it shoots pressurized oil, and when it gets to a certain pressure, it unlocks. And I guess it just all happens in like, milliseconds, where it just unlocks, advances 5 degrees, locks back. And this thing actually rotates, and essentially just the intake is rotating, causing the intake timing to advance. And the main thing with this, I mean, I'm not going to go more than that because I don't really understand it more than that, but the main thing with this is why I'm doing it is because you actually gain about 10 to 15 and 10 to 15 torque and horsepower in the mid-range just from this, just because you're able to advance, and that's really where you can gain the horsepower is in the mid-range with more timing advance. The intake manifold, I'm doing the RBC. My stock one will actually gain the most mid horsepower and torque, but the one I'm doing the RBC will gain the most high end, and it's also like the best flowing intake manifold, I believe, stock for the K series. And yeah, then I'm doing the oil pump obviously because it's way less bulky. Almost all the aftermarket oil pans are designed around that pump. I have not really seen much aftermarket pans. I've not seen many aftermarket pans designed after that big supercharger pump I showed you, but this is my Moroso aftermarket pan, and you could see what I showed you with that oil pump. It's huge and it wouldn't even fit in here. And this is designed just for that little neck. And this is actually the pickup is right there, and they have some trap doors around it. And this is also increases capacity by 2 quarts, as I mentioned in the last video. So that will also be going on in the end. So basically all I'm doing is just kind of, I guess you would want to call it like really small mods. I don't really consider that big. It's just a cam gear oil pump. It's more for like the safety of the motor. And then I bought an engine stand because I was actually going to do this by like laying it on its side, but decided not to. So I'll actually be rotating this in a few minutes to access the bottom, unbolt the windage tray, and then there's like a port that I actually have to fill, which I'm I'm not sure if it's going to be visible from here, but there is a small oil port that I have to put a 12 mil bolt into with Honda Bond, and if I don't do that, there won't be any oil pressure at all. So it's basically blocking a port from that big pump, and it's going to only use the port in the front. But yeah, that's really all I really have to do, and then I just have to retime the motor, which Honda is probably one of the easiest I've seen. All it is these two marks right here have to be parallel with each other, and then this mark right here, this triangle, has to meet with this triangle, and then that's it. And as long as your timing chain is connected and tensioned with this, which I have the tensioner off right there, it's pinned so it keeps the same tension it was before, you crank it about 5-6 rotations, and then just make sure that the triangles and the lines still line up, and that means your engine is timed perfectly. And it's very, very simple. I didn't know that this motor was actually that simple, but I think it's one of the more simpler designs there are for a motor that I've seen when it comes to timing. I had a hard time getting the crank pulley bolt off. That required torching. I broke a giant... This project has gone multiple times into the dark, mainly because I'm working on this when I get home from work around like 3, and sunset's pretty early right now. But yeah, I just had to have Rachel help me with setting the timing, mainly because these cams, they normally don't actually want to be with the ticks facing each other, because I guess, you know, there's a little bit of resistance from the valves, so I actually had to have her like kind of hold both of them in that mark, and then I set the timing and everything. But it's perfect. I rotated the engine like over 20 times already. Yeah, they're perfect right there, those two little ticks right there, and then it matches up right there on the crankshaft with the arrow. It actually matches up just a bit better than it does stock, believe it or not, but not to brag. But yeah, then I cleaned up the front timing cover, scraped all the gasket off the block, the timing cover. I have the new oil pan ready. I just cleaned it and screwed on some fittings. See, the pan is ready. I finished screwing on the, actually it's down there, the oil temp sensor right there. Yeah, I'm gonna put this on. It seems with the timing cover also bolting to the oil pan, it seems it's best to do both at once, where I put the oil pan on with the gasket on it, slightly tighten the bolts, and then put the front cover on, and then tighten the oil pan to the front cover so it pulls it all the way down towards the oil pan, and then I can fully snug the front cover and the oil pan, because there is kind of a gasket seal it makes on this side in the front. And then yeah, then the valve cover, I sanded and prepared. It's back there, but I gotta go clean it with a hose and wipe it down, and then maybe I can spray it tonight or tomorrow and put that on, and then technically the long block is complete. It's somewhat together. Put on the oil pan, obviously, front timing cover, like I said, the crank pulley, all that stuff. So it kind of looks like an engine again. The valve cover, I just actually got home and sprayed it. I prepped it all yesterday, but yeah, it looks pretty good. Ooh, this is very overexposed. It's probably gonna look kind of orange in the light, and it looked orange when I started spraying it. Yeah, it kind of looks orange in the camera too, mainly because it's in the direct sun just for drying. But it's very close to the same color as the car. Now the car is covered in like a good layer of dust, and this car does look very different when you wash it versus when it's like dirty, because I got it dirty and then I washed it and I was like, wow, that's a nice color. And yeah, I was gonna go wrinkle red, like the cliche Honda valve cover, but I could not find any. I literally went to like 4 different stores. I could only find wrinkle black, and I didn't want black, I wanted red. So when you look through the engine cover, you know, the 2ZZ has like a stock cast color cover, or it's black. Yeah, I want to see, like, when you look through the bay, you'll literally be able to just see red matching the car, and then you'll be able to see the Honda logo on the valve cover. And then the oil cap's already kind of black plastic. And then this, I actually sanded down the little dipstick. I sanded down the little oil emblem, and then I just sprayed it flat black because it's orange normally. And I think they sell aftermarket dipsticks, but they're like $100. So just for now, you know, I don't feel like balling out on like dressing, like hardware dress kits and stuff like that. I don't really care much about that stuff. It's more of like a show car thing. I just wanted to make it, you know, it's very basic. It's like $8 in paint, high temp red paint, which is very close to the color of the car. But that's that. So goal for today is Thursday. So tomorrow my intake manifold comes. So the goal is to actually take the motor off the stand. There's a few little things I can do right now. Like I'm probably gonna put the plug in right here for the thermostat blocking. It's actually quite nice. It's like this little, this 10 mil, you take it out and you put the thing in the plug, and then it has a little elbow that keeps the plug down and bolts to where the 10 mil is, so it can't pop out with pressure. Then obviously it's O-ringed, and then I have a Mishimoto 155-degree thermostat instead of the stock 178, I believe, Fahrenheit. And then I capped off this, which actually was off of my 2ZZ because that had the heater core hoses deleted too. It happened to fit perfectly over, so I capped the heater hose line off. I just gotta buy like one of those universal vacuum kits, or just buy a vacuum rubber, you know, like the little rubber caps, and just put a clamp on that. That's for the throttle body, the coolant. I deleted the other one because the other one would come out of the heater pipe. There's like a big metal pipe that would run under here and match up to this. So you can either loop the pipes, or you could just delete the one pipe and then block the other, which is what I did. And yeah, I mean, it's all going quite well. It's crazy how big this pan is.
Concentrating on breathing, so I see everything. Say hello to this feeling, so we know you're listening.
So I feel like I should update you guys. It's been about 2 days since I last really recorded, except that last clip you saw of me putting on the intake manifold. But I basically ran into kind of like a an error with the mount. So the water pump housing, which is actually this block that comes across right here. So it turns out this is actually a JDM motor. This is actually like from Japan. Ooh, so fancy, which is a good thing because that means this is a 10.5:1 compression, so it's a higher compression than the US K24 A2s. And then it has the RBB3 head, and there's 3 versions of the RBB head. RBB being the best flowing head for the K24, and the 3 being the best because I believe it has the best cams, which are the 06 plus TSX cams, and the valves are all about a millimeter or 2 bigger, so it has the most flow, you know, unported and everything. But basically, I bought this delete kit for the power steering and tensioner. This is the tensioner. It's kind of like manual. It goes up and down, and it relocates your alternator down here. Got it. The alternator bolted up. Well, actually, at first I realized my alternator was wrong. You can see this is a brand new alternator from AutoZone. The bolts go this way, so it actually mounts with one bolt like that, one bolt like that, and this is actually shaped differently with different holes. So I actually did not even have the holes to bolt this bracket to. So I spent basically like 5 hours yesterday kind of wasting my time going around parts stores trying to find like a short enough belt to use my stock tensioner. That failed. It's really hard to find a short belt like that. I did cut my K-tuned one to measure the size, so that kind of sucks because I can use it now, but I just ordered a new one for $40. But yeah, so I ended up having to buy this housing. Luckily, somebody locally had it for $50, and he was like 30 minutes away, so I went and got it. This is my old one for reference. This is the back, the thermostat, and then this is the front where the water pump bolts up, and then this is up against your block. So it actually moves oil and coolant, and this is actually the PCV valve for releasing crankcase pressure. So this is totally wrong, because if you notice it, we were just looking at this direction. There's no actual holes here to mount that bracket at all. So it's completely different for the JDM. You want the USDM simply because all the companies like K-Tune and whatever aftermarket companies, they all make mounts and stuff for the USDM market, or going off USDM. Now this is one of the only parts on the K24 that's like really different for JDM versus USDM. So that was a big issue. I just didn't feel like recording because it was a pain in the ass, mainly to do this, but it's fixed. Everything's together. I'm just waiting on the belt, but that's not a big deal. I had to do this before I put this in the car, because there's no way I'm going to take this apart while it's in the car, because it's going to be up against the firewall. So this is all done. I can put in a belt once the belt comes. That's fine. I can do a first start without a belt. That's fine. Once again, it's not gonna have any coolant in it anyway. And then I put on the intake manifold. I finished that, and then I put in the entire harness, the wiring harness. Now there are two plugs I had to change. This one, crankcase plug, it is ever so slightly different. I mean, like, they literally look the same, but it's ever so slightly different. And people say you either buy the crank sensor plug for an RSX, or you just rewire the 3 wires, and they're the same color. That's what I did. I rewired it. And then there's like some random plug back here, which is just 1 wire, and I have no idea what that plug does. I have no idea if I could have gotten away with that without using it, but I just did it. It was 1 wire, so luckily I had the old cut up harness off of this motor, so I was able to use the plugs off that. If you don't have that, then yeah, you would have to be buying the RSX plugs. And everything else is plugged in on it. I also wired up the car, technically completely, to my knowledge, following the instructions, basically splicing into that chassis plug that you see right there, the brown one, and then there's like 2 relays off of the OEM chassis for fuel and starter signal, and that's it. And then that's all wired up. It was like 9 to 10 wires. Not really interesting at all, in my opinion, to watch, because I literally just sat here for like an hour or 2 and just like messaged 3 people at once, making sure that what I was doing was right. Hopefully it'll be enough to start and run this car. But essentially, once this is in and bolted, all I have to do is just plug in the harness, the ECU, into that, and that's it. That's actually it. And I think I have to upload a base map. I have a base map for a stock K24 A2, and that's actually it, yeah. Because once I do that, then I can go for crank first start with just some oil in it and some trans fluid in it, without any coolant or anything, and just to make sure it starts. Doesn't make any funny noises, and then from there we can start buttoning up the entire car, getting the shifter cables set up, getting the gas pedal hooked up. So next day here, you saw me start putting the motor in, and then actually my battery died and I started charging it, but then it was too late. We got it basically almost in, except that brace bar, if you remember me mentioning it earlier in the video, that brace that kind of connected the 4 lower control arm points, that really got in the way of the oil pan right there. So if any of you have that, just a note. I don't know if it would have cleared with a stock pan. I do have a Moroso oil pan, and as you can see, it does hang fairly low. It hangs at about the subframe level, maybe a bit less, but it doesn't matter because there's a giant aluminum underplate there anyway that covers all of this. So yeah, that's a note. So we couldn't get it low enough into the vehicle. And then the next thing is, I successfully mounted the 2 out of 3 mounts. There's only 3 mounts in this engine. The one there, and then one right there. Now the stock 2ZZ, it has those 3 mounts, but then it also has a mount in the front as well. So this actually has less mounts. I'm not sure if that's, you know, a totally good thing. I'm not really sure. I'm sure the engine will be fine. It does weigh about, I believe, the same thing as the 2ZZ. I'm not sure if it's lighter or not, because I believe the 2ZZ is an aluminum block, I think. I really don't remember. If it's an iron block, then it's obviously heavier than this, but so yeah, I got these mounts completely bolted up fine, and then I could not get this one to bolt up, and it actually had me fearing that the alternator was wrong, because as you know, I did a low mount alternator setup down there, and that is actually pressed up against the firewall almost basically. So turns out this plate right here, this is the only mount you actually have to use from the stock engine. That they don't provide you is this mount that bolts to the timing cover. It doesn't really bolt to the timing cover, but it sits in front of the timing cover and it bolts into the block. Now apparently that mount is actually different on the JDM motor as well. So those are 2 things now that are different on the JDM motor. We have the mount and then the water pump housing. This was the mount before. As you can see, this is how it mounts to it. This hole and this hole, ignore the magnet right there, are different heights. As you can see right there, that's the now proper mount. Both bolt holes have to be level. So actually this mount sat 3 inches to the left, the 2 holes. So I was like, there's no way I can push the engine more forward, because literally the intake manifold would go through the firewall. And I've seen this motor with this intake manifold mounted in this car before, and I'm like, that's weird, because you know the engine seems perfectly straight and everything. That would, you know, and then did some Googling. CRV mount is what you want. Luckily I found one locally from the same guy who had the housing for $60, and back on track. I picked that up on my way home from work, and yeah, basically that'll bolt up now. As you can see, I'm about 1 inch off the holes, but basically I'm just gonna have to put like a pry bar and kind of just shift that last inch to bolt down that mount, but it will 100% bolt down with the alternator almost up against the firewall. The belt still clears just fine, and the radiator line goes over the alternator, so hopefully that'll be fine. It's not pressed up against the frame, it's more or less pressed up against like the fabric sound deadening piece that is between the frame and that. So yeah, I also did put in my battery yesterday, and I didn't record it because I figured it wouldn't start. But so first of all, I found out I had no ground to the chassis. Somehow that main ground wire came off while I was doing the ground, and I could not find it anywhere. It turns out it was kind of stuck in the frame rail, kind of hiding. So I grounded the chassis. Everything works in the sense of like the Lotus feature. Like you could turn on the key, the dash works, the lights work, everything like that works. And then I went to turn it on, and so we get ECU power and we get ignition because I connected my laptop and I uploaded my base map to the ECU to make this run, because the map on the ECU before the Honda K Pro was a turbo build K24, so that obviously would probably run really weird because it would be giving it too much fuel. So I did that and I confirmed that. Luckily, John, who's the owner of Track Spec, which is actually this right here, Track Spec. This is where the car was actually serviced with its previous owner and stuff like that, and they did some like head work on the old engine and clutch and stuff like that. And he actually helped me with the wiring. He's been helping me a lot. I've been asking a lot of people for help just because wiring is not my strong suit. The mechanical stuff I can usually figure out. If I'm like really stumped, I'll ask people, but I can usually just figure it out myself. But the wiring, basically the only thing I did, which really isn't that big of a mistake, the directions for how to wire this are not very clear. They just say cut this wire and wire it. That's it. So this is using the stock relay box fuel relay and starter relay. Now, it told me to cut those wires and wire it, but I actually wired the wire going into the relay or coming out of it, versus they actually wanted you to use the wire coming out of the plug. So they didn't specify, they just said cut and wire. So I was like, okay, they're probably bypassing the relay, so I'll just wire it to the outside wire. Nope, turns out I got my multimeter, I had Rachel hold the start button, and there was a full 12 volts coming from that wire I cut. So basically now I gotta unplug that plug, somehow fish it out a little bit, because I don't want to take this out again, and just basically cut the wire that I did and just wire it to the plug, those 2 wires, fuel pump and starter, and then realistically the car should prime the fuel pumps and it should get crank. And that's basically it. And then I have oil, I have an oil filter, I have some trans fluid to put in there just to get it to run, like just start up. And then from there, if we can confirm that it runs, starts, it probably won't run too well because it'll have a bunch of vacuum leaks and stuff, but if we can confirm that it runs, that'll be a really good step in the direction, because then I could do my gas pedal, my throttle cable, my shift linkage, axles, you know, just button up the swap, knowing that the main heart works. So that's what I'm going to do now. That's a first start. I'm glad it's Monday today. I was hoping to get this by Sunday yesterday, but whatever, one day late. It's good to know. Engine doesn't knock, so that's good enough for me. It was open header, or open head technically, because the headers, they don't fit, because as I said, these have to be modified. That bottom piece right there hits the subframe. So I'm actually going to be taking those tomorrow to the fab shop down the street to kind of try to start clearancing or like raising it or rebending it around the subframe, so I can at least bolt it on and I can have an O2 sensor, because it will run much better with an O2 sensor. It's on a base map, and yeah, God knows how long it's been since this engine has started, but I'm not seeing any leaks or anything. I built oil pressure before by just cranking the motor. Once I got the fuel pump situated, the battery wasn't enough to start it. That's mainly because whenever you turn the AC2 on a Lotus, it turns on the headlights. I actually just unplugged the wire, so it doesn't do that, but it's dumb. So I have 4 HIDs running. I have the fuel pump constantly running, 2 fuel pumps technically, because there's a 255 and then an in-tank, and then also trying to crank a motor, which this probably takes a ton more cranking amps than the stock 1.8 Toyota motor, just simply because it's a 2.4. But I had to run to AutoZone to buy a jump pack for like 80 bucks. Luckily, it wasn't even it was barely charged, and it still was able to jump it. I don't know if I'll return that or not. Maybe it'll be nice to have in the Lotus in the trunk. But so basically with wiring, the starter issue was pretty easy. All I did was I didn't wire it correctly, as I said. It had to go to the wire in the plug, not the wire coming out of, like, going away from the plug. The fuel pump I actually did right, but the thing is, so what we found out is on the ECU, there's actually a pin E1 on the E connector, and that's what actually grounds. It's actually this yellow one that's sticking out right here. I cut. That's what grounds the fuel pump relay to actually activate the fuel pump, and then you can set it for prime for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. So that just was not working, and it's common that people actually fry that grounding resistor on the ECU, but it isn't really that big of a deal because the ECU can like still work, but that little resistor can be fried. So it's not like the ECU is fried, which is good because I almost shit myself when I thought it was. But basically what that means is for the fuel pump relay, what I had to do was actually ground the relay, the fuel pump relay. So basically the second I put it in ignition, the fuel pump is just constantly running. I don't always like that much. Maybe I'll most likely run that ground to a switch, so at least I can control, like, you know, like if I start priming it and the car's not starting, I don't know, like I could turn off the pump or whatever. I don't really like having the pump run constantly. It takes a lot of energy too. But that's really the issues I had. Was I just as I said, the John from TrackSpec, he's literally for the past like hour and a half has been just messaging me on Facebook, telling me to like, hey, check power and ground on this pin, this pin, this pin. And you know, like, this is my first time actually using a multimeter on a build, believe it or not, this little Walmart one. And I've never used that before, so it's actually very helpful, because normally I would be like unplugging, plugging things. So it's actually very helpful to use a multimeter, believe it or not. But yeah, so tomorrow, like I said, I'm going to take the exhaust, because I really do want the exhaust on, simply because of the O2. It still will be straight piped and really loud. Once this like drives, the shop is like down the street, so I'll drive it straight piped, and then he'll basically build a 90 degree to go back into the stock exhaust. But This is most likely where I'm going to wrap up this video, because I did want it to be the doing the stuff to the K, putting in the engine, and then the first start. And then the next video is going to be like driving it on the road and stuff, I guess, and just dialing. I mean, there's still a lot of things to do. Like, I have to connect the shifter cables, which is all custom. I'm going to have to actually take out the shifter assembly and cut some stuff to mount that. I still have to mount the gas pedal, an actual gas pedal. Mount the whole throttle cable to the throttle body. Axles are not that hard. The exhaust, I mean, there's still like things to do, and then obviously all this wiring. This is all just like this, just for the first start, to make sure it works, because you don't want to tuck and loom all your wiring, and then you're like, oh no, it doesn't work. Then you have to undo it. You know, you want it to work, and then once you know it works, idles, whatever, then you can clean up your wiring, loom it all, and tuck your ECU, whatever you need to do. So yeah, so thanks very much for watching, guys. It's probably a long video. I feel like this video is definitely over 30 minutes, most likely. So see you guys in the next video where we drive this car. Look at my finger from holding the idle air control. That was sharp.